Hello, story lovers. Tonight, we're diving into a tale of passion, secrets, and choices that could change everything. Hearts will be broken, love will be tested, and every twist will leave you on the edge of your seat. Comment below where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, hit like, subscribe. Share it with someone who loves a powerful love story, and tap the bell so you never miss the next thrilling chapter. Ready? Let's begin. Asterisk, the Manhattan skyline cut through the October night like broken glass, each light a shard of someone else's dream. Victoria Hayes pressed her palm against the cool window of her cramped studio apartment, watching the city breathe below her. 3 days until her sister's wedding. 3 days until everything changed. Her phone buzzed against the paint-stained wooden table. "You're coming tonight, right?" Emma's voice carried that edge it always did when she was nervous. The farewell party at the Meridian rooftop. Philip's business partners will be there. Victoria's stomach clenched. Philip Morrison, the golden boy of Manhattan's elite, heir to Morrison Industries, the man who had somehow convinced her sister that love meant abandoning everything you used to be. "I'll be there," Victoria said, though the words tasted like Ashdot 2 hours. Later, she stood in the elevator of the Meridian Hotel, her reflection staring back from the polished doors. The emerald dress had been Emma's choice, too tight, too expensive. It's much like the person her sister wanted her to become. The elevator climbed higher, carrying her toward a world she'd never quite fit into, no matter how hard Emma tried to drag her there. The rooftop exploded with golden light and the sound of forced laughter. Fairy lights hung like captured stars above heads that turned toward her with the kind of polite interest that meant nothing. Victoria recognized the type immediately. Old money, new money. The kind of people who measured worth in stock portfolios and summer homes. Victoria. Emma's voice cut through the jazz quartet's smooth melody. Her sister appeared in a cloud of champagne-colored silk, arms outstretched, smile blindingly perfect. "You look beautiful." But Victoria caught the quick scan Emma gave her. The tiny frown when she noticed Victoria's simple jewelry, the flat shoes instead of heels. "Come meet some people," Emma said, her grip on Victoria's arm just a little too tight. "Philip's associates are dying to hear about your little gallery." Little gallery, the words hit like ice water. 3 years of 16-hour days of choosing pain over food, sleeping on the gallery floor when rent was due. Little Victoria nodded and let herself be led toward a cluster of men in identical black suits, their conversations dying as she approached. She recognized the look in their eyes. Polite curiosity mixed with the kind of dismissal reserved for people who chose art over profit. "This is my sister Victoria," Emma announced. "She owns a gallery in Soho." "How charming," one of them said, his smile sharp enough to cut. "And is it profitable?" Question hung in the air like smoke. Victoria felt her face burn, but before she could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew her attention. A man stood with his back to the party, speaking in low tones with the hotel manager. Something about his posture suggested authority, the kind that came from never having to prove it. He turned slightly, and Victoria caught a glimpse of a profile that belonged in marble. Strong jaw, olive skin, dark hair that looked expensive to maintain. The suit fit him like it had been born on his body. Professional dancer, Victoria thought suddenly. Emma had mentioned wanting to liven up the party, complained that her guests were treating it like a board meeting instead of a celebration. An idea sparked, dangerous and reckless. "Excuse me," Victoria said to the men, who had already begun talking around her as if she were invisible. She walked toward the stranger, her flat shoes silent on the marble floor. Up close, he was even more striking. When he turned at her approach, she found herself looking into eyes the color of dark coffee, intelligent and guarded. "I hope you're here to get this party started," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "'cause honestly, it needs some life injected into it." He studied her face with an expression she couldn't read. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or amusement. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that made her think of expensive wine and Mediterranean sunsets. "I think there might be some confusion." "No confusion at all," Victoria replied. "You're here to dance, right?" My sister specifically mentioned wanting to liven things up. She gestured toward the crowd of guests standing in their careful clusters, their conversations polite but lifeless. The jazz quartet played beautifully, but the dance floor remained empty except for one elderly couple swaying near the edge. The man studied her with that calculating look again, as if weighing options she couldn't see. "You want me to dance?" he said slowly. "That's what you're here for, isn't it?" Victoria challenged. "My sister is getting married next week, and this is supposed to be a celebration. But look at these people. They're treating it like a stockholders' meeting." Something shifted in his expression. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "What kind of dancing did you have in mind?" Victoria hadn't thought that far ahead. She glanced around the rooftop, taking in the space, the music, the fairy lights creating a natural spotlight in the center. "Something that will get people moving," she said. "You're the professional. You tell me." The word professional seemed to spark something in his eyes, but before Victoria could analyze it, he stepped closer. The movement was fluid, confident, and suddenly she was very aware of his presence. "If I'm going to perform," he said quietly, "I'll need a partner." The suggestion hit Victoria like electricity. She had taken dance lessons as a child, but that was years ago. The thought of dancing in front of all these people, especially with a stranger, should have terrified her. Instead, she found herself nodding. "I can manage." He extended his hand with old-fashioned gallantry. The gesture was so elegant that several nearby guests turned to watch. Victoria placed her hand in his, noting the warmth of his skin, the strength in his fingers. "Julian Torres," he said softly, for her ears only. "Victoria Hayes," she replied. "Emma's sister and your dance partner for the evening." Julian led her toward the center of the rooftop where the fairy lights created a natural stage. Victoria was suddenly conscious of every eye on them. But Julian seemed completely at ease. The jazz quartet, sensing the moment, shifted into a more upbeat swing number. Julian positioned Victoria with gentle but firm hands, one at her waist, the other holding her hand at the perfect height. When he began to move, Victoria found herself following instinctively. To her amazement, they moved together as if they had been dancing partners for years. Julian led with subtle pressure and gentle guidance, never forcing, always clear in his intentions. The other guests had stopped their conversations to watch. Victoria caught a glimpse of Emma's delighted face, her sister clapping with pure joy, but mostly Victoria was aware only of Julian. The way he moved, the warmth of his hand on her back, the concentrated expression on his face as he navigated them around the improvised dance floor. "You're very good at this," she said breathlessly as he spun her out and drew her back in. "So are you," he replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. For someone who just volunteered on the spot, they danced through 2 songs, drawing other couples onto the floor. By the time the music slowed, the entire atmosphere of the party had transformed. People were laughing, talking more animatedly. The energy Victoria had wanted for her sister's celebration finally filling the rooftop. As the final notes faded, Julian dipped Victoria low, their faces inches apart. For a moment, suspended in his arms with the Manhattan lights twinkling around them, Victoria felt like she was living in a dream. His dark eyes held hers. And she saw something there that made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with the dancing. "Thank you," he said as he brought her upright. "That was unexpected. You're welcome," Victoria managed. "Really brought the party to life. I'm sure my sister will want to book you for the wedding." Something flickered across Julian's face, too quick for Victoria to interpret. Before she could ask about it, Emma appeared at her elbow, practically bouncing with excitement. "Victoria, that was incredible!" Emma exclaimed. "I had no idea you could dance like that. And you," she turned to Julian with a brilliant smile, "were absolutely magical." "Philip will be so sorry he missed this." "Philip," Julian repeated slowly. "My fiancé," Emma explained. "He's stuck at some emergency meeting. But he'll be here soon. You should meet him." Victoria noticed Julian's expression had become carefully neutral. The easy warmth from their dance suddenly replaced by something more guarded. "I should probably get back to the hotel manager," Julian said politely. There are some details we need to discuss? Of course, Emma nodded. Victoria, make sure to get his information. I absolutely want him for the wedding. As Julian began to move away, Victoria felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. Wait, she called after him. Will I see you again? For the wedding planning, I mean? Julian paused. For a moment, Victoria thought he might say something important. Instead, he simply smiled, a smile that seemed to hold secrets. I think, he said carefully, that's very likely. As he disappeared into the crowd, Victoria touched her waist where his hand had been. She had set out to help her sister's party and ended up dancing with a stranger who felt anything but strange. The Manhattan night suddenly seemed full of possibilities. She hadn't considered when the evening began. She had no idea that Julian Torres wasn't just a dancer hired for the evening, but the CEO of Torres Tech, one of the city's most powerful companies, and she certainly didn't know that in 3 days, at her sister's wedding. Her entire world would shatter when she discovered exactly who Philip Morrison really was to the man she couldn't stop thinking about. Victoria spent the next 3 days, painting with a fury that surprised even her. Her brush strokes were bold, reckless, filled with the memory of strong hands and dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her careful walls. Every time she closed her eyes, she could feel Julian's hand at her waist, hear his voice saying her name like it was something precious. She was adding final touches to a canvas when her phone rang. The wedding planner is having a crisis. Emma's voice was tight with stress. The string quartet canceled last minute. Can you handle the music situation? I can't deal with these creative types. Creative types. As if Victoria's entire life wasn't built on creativity. I'll take care of it, Victoria said, already reaching for her jacket. The church was a monument to old money. It's all soaring arches and stained glass windows that painted rainbow shadows across marble floors. Victoria found herself standing in the vestibule, watching workers arrange white roses and baby's breath into formations that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Excuse me, are you the wedding coordinator? Victoria turned at the familiar accent and felt her heart stop. Julian stood behind her, but this wasn't the man from the rooftop party. This Julian wore a tailored gray suit that screamed expensive, his hair perfectly styled, his entire presence radiating the kind of power that came with corner offices and board meetings. Julian, the word came out as barely a whisper. Its expression was carefully neutral, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. Victoria, I didn't expect to see you here. I'm handling some last-minute issues for Emma, she said slowly, her mind racing. What are you doing here? Before he could answer, footsteps echoed across the marble. Victoria turned to see Philip Morrison striding toward them, his face lighting up when he spotted Julian. There you are, Philip called out. I was wondering when you'd show up. He reached them and clapped Julian on the shoulder with the easy familiarity of old friends. Victoria's world tilted sideways. Victoria, I'd like you to meet my business partner and best man, Julian Torres. The words hit her like a physical blow. Business partner, best man. The man she'd commanded to dance, the man she'd spent 3 days thinking about, wasn't some hired entertainer, he was Philip's best friend. We've met, Julian said quietly, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. Philip's eyebrows shot up. Really? Where? The party, Victoria managed, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. He was the dancer. Dancer. Philip laughed, the sound sharp in the echoing space. Julian doesn't dance. He barely leaves his office long enough to eat. He must be thinking of someone else. Victoria looked at Julian, waiting for him to correct Philip, to explain what had happened on the rooftop. Instead, he simply stood there, his expression unreadable. Must have been a misunderstanding, Julian said finally. The betrayal hit her. Like ice water, he was going to pretend it never happened. Pretend that night, that dance, that moment when the whole world had felt different, meant nothing. I need some air, Victoria said, turning toward the door. Victoria, wait. Julian's voice followed her, but she didn't stop. Outside, the October air cut through her thin sweater like knives. She was halfway down the church steps when Julian caught up with her. Let me explain. Explain what? Victoria whirled around, her carefully controlled facade finally cracking. Explain how you let me make a fool of myself. How you played along with some game I didn't even know I was playing. It wasn't a game. Then what was it? 'Cause from where I'm standing, it looks like you thought it was hilarious that some nobody mistook you for hired help. Julian's jaw tightened. You're not a nobody. No, I'm just the sister without the trust fund. The one with the little gallery who doesn't understand how the real world works. The words poured out of her, bitter and raw. Did you laugh about it later? Tell Philip how his fiancée, his pathetic sister, tried to order around Julian Torres? I haven't told him anything. Why not? Afraid it might hurt your precious reputation to admit you danced with someone beneath your station. Something dangerous flickered in Julian's eyes. He stepped closer, and for a moment, Victoria was back. On that rooftop, feeling the electricity that crackled between them. You want to know why I didn't tell him? Hey? Julian's voice was low, intense. Because that dance was the first real thing that's happened to me in years. Because for 20 minutes I wasn't Julian Torres, CEO of Torres Tech. I was just someone dancing with a beautiful woman who looked at me like I was worth something more than my bank account. Victoria's anger faltered. Julian, no. I came to that hotel for a business meeting with Philip, he continued, his words coming faster now, like a dam breaking. I was supposed to sign the final merger papers. Torres Tech and Morrison Industries, the deal that would make us both billionaires. Merger. Victoria's mind reeled. Emma never mentioned, 'cause Philip hasn't told her yet. The announcement was supposed to happen at the wedding reception. Celebration of two unions, business and personal. The pieces clicked into place. With horrible clarity, emergency meeting Philip had been stuck in emergency meeting during the party. Julian Assat, the hotel, discussing details with the manager. The way he'd tensed when Emma mentioned Philip's name. You're merging your companies. Was merging, Julian corrected. Past tense? What do you mean? Julian ran a hand through his hair, disturbing the perfect styling. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain. I walked away from that meeting after our dance. Okay. I told Philip I needed time to think, but the truth is, I couldn't stop thinking about you. About how it felt to hold you. To see you light up when the music started. Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. Julian, don't. 3 days, Victoria. 3 days I've been trying to convince myself it was just the moment, just the music, just the champagne. But it wasn't, was it? She wanted to lie, wanted to protect herself from whatever this was becoming. Instead, she found herself shaking her head. No, she whispered. It wasn't. Julian stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his. Cologne could see the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of late nights and heavy responsibilities. Philip is my best friend, he said quietly. It's been since college. I introduced him to venture capital, helped him build Morrison Industries from nothing. And tomorrow, I'm supposed to stand beside him while he marries your sister. The merger. The merger dies if I don't sign. Philip needs my technology patents and my development team. Without them, Morrison Industries won't survive the next 2 years. Victoria felt the weight of what he was telling her. You'd destroy your best friend's company? I'd choose you. The words hung between them like a blade. Victoria stared at Julian, seeing the truth in his dark eyes, the terrible sincerity that made everything so much worse. You can't, she said. Emma loves him. It's wedding, it's everything she's dreamed of. And what about what you dream of? The question hit her like a physical blow. What did she dream of? Late nights in her gallery, surrounded by canvases and the smell of oil paint, or this standing in front of a church with a man who looked at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. It doesn't matter what I dream of, she said, though the words felt like swallowing glass. Emma is my sister. Philip is your best friend. Some things matter more than what we want. Julian's expression hardened. Even if what we want could change everything? Before Victoria could answer, the church doors opened behind them. Emma appeared at the top of the steps, radiant in her white dress, veil flowing behind her like captured moonlight. There you are, she called down to them. Victoria, they're ready for the rehearsal. And Julian, Philip is looking for you. Victoria looked up at her sister, so happy, so trusting, so completely unaware that her world was balanced on a knife's edge. Then she looked at Julian, seeing her own anguish reflected in his eyes. "We should go," Victoria said quietly. Julian nodded, but as they started up the steps, he caught her hand. "This isn't over," he said, his voice too low for Emma to hear. Victoria pulled her hand free, though it took all her strength. "Yes," she said, meeting his eyes one last time. "It is." But even as she said the words, she knew she was lying. Tomorrow at the wedding, she would have to watch Julian stand beside Philip while Emma pledged her life to a man whose fortune hung by a thread. She would have to smile and celebrate while the man who'd made her feel alive for the first time in years slipped through her fingers. And somewhere in the space between what they wanted and what they could have, Victoria realized that some betrayals came not from malice, but from the terrible weight of impossible choices. The wedding dawned gray and cold, with clouds that threatened rain but never quite delivered. Victoria stood in the bridal suite of the Plaza Hotel, watching Emma transform into someone she barely recognized. The designer dress, the professional makeup, the practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "You look beautiful," Victoria said. Because it was true, and because it was what sisters were supposed to say, Emma turned from the mirror, her movements careful to avoid disturbing the layers of silk and lace. "Do I look like I belong in this world?" Emma asked quietly. The question caught Victoria off guard. For 3 years, ever since Emma had started dating Philip, she'd seemed so confident, so sure that this was what she wanted. "You look like yourself," Victoria said, "just more expensive." Emma laughed, but the sound was hollow. "Philip's mother sent over some jewelry this morning. The Morrison family diamonds are supposed to be worth more than most people's houses." She gestured toward a velvet box on the vanity. Inside, a necklace sparkled with the kind of brilliance that only came from stones with names and histories. But they feel like chains," Emma said softly. "Beautiful, valuable chains." Victoria moved closer to her sister, seeing past the perfect makeup to the uncertainty beneath. "I'm not having doubts," Emma said quickly. Too quickly. "I love Philip. I do. It's just that sometimes I wonder if he loves me, or if he loves the idea of me. The perfect wife who'll look good at charity functions and never ask too many questions about his business." Victoria's chest tightened. If only Emma knew how much Philip's business was hanging by a thread. How Julian held the power to save or destroy everything her sister thought she was marrying into. "What would you ask him, if you could ask anything?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the diamond necklace. "I'd ask him why he never talks about the future, real future, not the merger or the company expansion, but us. Children, growing old together. It's like he's so focused on building this empire that he's forgotten to build a life." Before Victoria could respond, a knock interrupted them. Philip's voice came through the door. "Emma? Sorry to bother you, but I need to speak with Victoria." For a moment, Emma frowned. It's bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony. "I'm not looking, I promise. I just need Victoria." Emma nodded to Victoria, who slipped out of the bridal suite. Since she'd known him, he looked less than perfect. His usually immaculate hair was slightly mussed, his bow tie crooked. "Is everything all right?" Victoria asked. "That's what I was hoping you could tell me." Philip's voice was strained. "Victoria's missing." Victoria's heart stopped. "Missing?" "Never came back to the hotel last night. He's not answering his phone. The ceremony starts in 2 hours, and my best man has vanished." Victoria tried to keep her expression neutral, but inside panic was rising. Had Julian really walked away? Maybe he just needed some air. Big weddings can be overwhelming. Philip laughed, but there was no humor in it. Julian doesn't get overwhelmed. Julian gets results. Except lately, he's been acting strange, distracted. Ever since that party at the Meridian. Strange how. Keeps saying he needs more time to review the terms, but we've been working on this deal for 6 months. He knows those contracts better than our lawyers do. Emma doesn't know, but without that merger, Morrison Industries is in trouble. Real trouble. Victoria felt sick. What kind of trouble? The kind where I might not be able to afford the life I've promised your sister. The kind where this wedding becomes the most expensive mistake I've ever made. The weight of Philip's words settled over Victoria like a shroud. Emma's future, her happiness, everything hung on Julian's decision. And Julian was missing. "I'm sure he'll show up," Victoria said, though she wasn't sure of anything anymore. "He better, because if he doesn't, I'll have to tell Emma that our honeymoon in Tuscany might have to become a weekend in Atlantic City." Philip straightened his bow tie and walked away, leaving Victoria standing in the hallway with the terrible knowledge that she might be the reason her sister's world was about to collapse. An hour later, Victoria was arranging Emma's train when her phone buzzed. "Meet me in the hotel lobby. We need to talk." Victoria's hands shook as she read the message. Emma, focused on her reflection in the mirror, didn't notice. The lobby of the plaza was a symphony of marble and gold, filled with wedding guests arriving for the ceremony. Victoria spotted Julian immediately. He stood near the windows overlooking Central Park, still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. She approached him carefully, like he might disappear if she moved too quickly. "Philip is looking for you." "I know." Julian turned to face her, and Victoria saw something broken in his expression. "I've been walking all night, trying to figure out how to do the right thing. And what did you decide?" "That there is no right thing. Every choice destroys someone I care about." Victoria glanced around the lobby, acutely aware of the guests who might recognize them. "Julian, you have to sign the merger, even if it's built on a lie?" The question hung between them like a challenge. "What lie?" Julian stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The lie that any of this matters. The money, the merger, the empire we're building. Philip thinks success will make him happy, but I've been successful for 10 years, Victoria. I've had everything I thought I wanted, and I was empty until I danced with you, Julian. Please." "I spent the night walking through the city, looking at all the places I've never really seen because I was too busy making money to notice. I ended up at your gallery." Victoria's breath caught. "We went to my gallery. The night security guard let me in. I hope you don't mind." Julian's expression softened slightly. "Your paintings, Victoria. They're incredible. Raw and honest and full of life. Looking at them, I understood something." "What?" "That you've been doing what I've been afraid to do. You've been living your truth, even when it was hard. Even when it meant being broke and dismissed and called naive." Victoria felt tears threatening. "My truth isn't going to pay Emma's bills." "No, but my truth might." Julian reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "Sign the merger papers." Victoria should have felt relief, but instead she felt something crumbling inside her chest. "And what about us?" "There is no us," Julian said, though his voice broke slightly on the words. "There's just two people who had one perfect dance and then remembered why they live in different worlds." Julian. "After today, I'm moving to San Francisco. Taurus Tech is opening a West Coast office, and I'll be running it personally. A fresh start, away from everything that reminds me of choices I can't make." The finality in his voice hit Victoria like a physical blow. This was really happening. In a few hours, she would watch Julian stand beside Philip while Emma pledged her life to a man whose fortune Julian was buying with his own happiness. "I should go," Julian said. He started to walk away, then turned back. "For what it's worth, Victoria, these have been the most real 3 days of my life." Victoria watched him disappear into the crowd of wedding guests, carrying the merger papers that would save her sister's future and bury her own. Upstairs, Emma was putting on the Morrison diamonds, their brilliance catching the light like tears. She looked radiant and fragile and completely unaware that her happiness had just been purchased with someone else's heart. "There you are," Emma said when Victoria returned. Victoria looked at her sister, so beautiful in her white dress, so trusting in her assumption that love was enough to build a life on. "Everything's perfect," Victoria lied. But as the music began to play in the chapel below, Victoria realized that some perfections came at a price that could never be repaid. And some sacrifices were so complete that they left nothing behind but the memory of what might have been. The ceremony was flawless. Emma walked down the aisle like she was floating, the Morrison diamonds catching the light from the stained glass windows. Philip stood at the altar in his perfect tuxedo, his smile never wavering as he watched his bride approach. And Julian, impeccable now in his role as best man, handed over the rings with steady hands that gave no hint of the storm Victoria knew was raging inside him. Victoria sat in the second row, watching her sister pledge her life to a man whose fortune had just been saved by someone else's sacrifice. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Emma's kiss with Philip looked like every fairy tale ending Victoria had ever read. It should have been perfect, but as the guests filed out of the chapel toward the reception, Victoria caught Julian's eye across the crowd. For just a moment, his careful mask slipped, and she saw the devastation underneath. Then Emma was beside her, radiant with happiness, pulling her toward the reception hall. "Victoria, I need you to sit at the head table, right between Julian and Philip's cousin Marcus." "Emma, I'd rather, please. I need my sister close by. Besides, you and Julian seem to get along so well at the rehearsal. If only Emma knew how." Well, the reception was everything Emma had dreamed of. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across tables laden with white roses and gold accents. The string quartet played softly while guests found their seats. Their conversations, a gentle hum of congratulations and champagne-fueled cheer. Victoria found herself at the head table, acutely aware of Julian sitting 2 chairs away. He was playing his part perfectly, raising toasts and laughing at Marcus's jokes. But Victoria could see the tension in his shoulders. It's the careful way he avoided looking in her direction. The first course had just been served when Philip stood, tapping his champagne flute to get the room's attention. "Thank you all for being here on this incredible day," Philip began, his voice carrying easily across the room. "Emma has made me the happiest man alive, and I wanted to share that joy with all of you." Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the crowd. Emma beamed up at her new husband, her eyes bright with tears of happiness. "But tonight isn't just about celebrating Emma and me," Philip continued. "It's also about celebrating a new chapter for Morrison Industries." Victoria's stomach dropped. Beside her, she felt Julian go very still. "Today I'm thrilled to announce the merger of Morrison Industries with Torres Tech, creating one of the most powerful technology conglomerates on the East Coast." The room erupted in applause. Victoria watched Emma's face light up with surprise and delight, clearly hearing this news for the first time. But Victoria's attention was fixed on Julian, whose knuckles had gone white around his champagne flute. "This merger," Philip continued, basking in the approval of the crowd, "represents not just a business partnership, but a friendship that goes back to our college days. Julian Torres isn't just my business partner, he's my brother." More applause. Julian stood when Philip gestured to him, his smile perfectly crafted for the cameras that were no doubt capturing every moment. But Victoria saw the muscle twitching in his jaw. "And the best part," Philip said, his arm around Emma's shoulders, "is that this merger means Emma and I can finally afford the life we've always dreamed of. The house in the Hamptons, the yacht, maybe even that little chateau in Provence she's been hinting about." Emma laughed, radiant with happiness, completely unaware that her husband had just reduced their love story to a financial transaction in front of 200 guests. Victoria felt sick. This wasn't what Julian had signed up for. He'd agreed to save Philip's company quietly, with dignity, not to have his sacrifice turned into a public spectacle for Philip's ego. As Philip finally sat down and conversation resumed, Victoria caught Julian's eye. What she saw there made her blood run cold. It wasn't just hurt or betrayal. It was something darker, more final. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of forced smiles and polite conversation. Victoria pushed food around her plate, hyper-aware of every glance between Julian and Philip, every laugh that didn't reach Julian's eyes. It wasn't until the dancing started that things truly fell apart. The band had just launched into their first slow song when Philip pulled Emma onto the dance floor. They moved together beautifully, Emma's dress flowing around them like captured starlight. Other couples began to join them, the floor filling with swaying figures. Victoria was making her way toward the ladies' room when a hand caught her arm. "Dance with me?" Julian's voice was low, intense. Victoria looked around the crowded reception, acutely aware of all the eyes that might be watching. "Julian, we can't. One dance. After everything that's happened, don't I deserve one dance?" There was something desperate in his voice that made Victoria's resolve crumble. She let him lead her onto the dance floor, into the crowd of couples where they might blend in, come invisible for just a few minutes. Julian pulled her close, closer than was appropriate for a public dance. Victoria could smell his cologne, feel the warmth of his hand on her back. "I can't do this," he said quietly, his lips close to her ear. "Do what?" "Pretend. Watch Philip turn our friendship into a business transaction. Watch him reduce Emma too. A prize he's won with my money." Victoria pulled back to look at his face. "Julian, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that maybe there are some prices too high to pay, even for friendship." Fear crawled up Victoria's spine. "What does that mean?" Before Julian could answer, the music stopped abruptly. Commotion near the head table drew everyone's attention. Philip was standing beside his chair, his face pale, a phone pressed to his ear. "What?" Philip's voice carried across the suddenly quiet room. "That's impossible. Run the numbers again." Emma appeared at his side, her face creased with concern. "Philip, what's wrong?" Philip ended the call, his hand shaking slightly. When he looked up at the crowd of guests, all watching him with curious expressions, his face had gone ashen. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice strained. "There seems to be some kind of emergency at the office. A problem with the merger contracts." Victoria felt Julian tense beside her. Around them, guests began murmuring, the festive atmosphere evaporating like morning mist. "What kind of problem?" Emma asked, her voice small. Philip's eyes found Julian across the dance floor. There was something terrible in his expression, a dawning realization that made Victoria's blood turn to ice. "The kind where my business partner seems to have had a change of heart," Philip said slowly. "Julian, would you care to explain to my wife why the merger papers you signed this afternoon have been mysteriously withdrawn?" The silence in the room was deafening. Every eye turned to Julian, who stood perfectly still beside Victoria on the dance floor. "I don't know what you're talking about," Julian said carefully. Philip laughed, but the sound was bitter, broken. "Don't you? Because I just got a call from my lawyers? Apparently Torres Tech filed an injunction against the merger 2 hours ago. Something about coercion under false pretenses and withdrawal of consent." Victoria's world tilted sideways. She stared at Julian, seeing the truth written in the careful blankness of his expression. He hadn't just walked away from the merger, he had actively sabotaged it. At Emma's wedding reception, in front of everyone, "Julian," she whispered, but he didn't look at her. "You want to know the best part?" Philip continued, his voice rising. "The injunction was filed by Torres Tech's legal team in San Francisco, which means my dear friend Julian has been planning this betrayal for weeks, maybe months." Emma's face crumpled. The fairy tale was disintegrating in real time. In front of 200 guests, with their phones already out, recording every devastating moment. "Philip, please," Emma said, reaching for her husband's arm. "Can we discuss this privately?" "Privately?" Philip shook off her hand. "Like the way Julian privately destroyed my company at my own wedding? Like the way he privately made sure my wife finds out she married a bankrupt man in front of everyone we know?" Julian finally moved, stepping forward with his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Philip, let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you played the loyal friend while plotting to destroy everything I've worked for? How you smiled and shook hands and signed papers you knew were worthless?" "The papers weren't worthless when I signed them. Then why?" Philip's voice broke on the word. "Why would you do this to me?" To Emma. "We're supposed to be friends." Julian's carefully controlled mask finally cracked. When he spoke, his voice was raw with years of suppressed anger. "Friends don't lie to each other, Philip. Friends don't use each other's desperation to manipulate business deals. And friends sure as hell don't announce mergers as wedding presents without asking first. I was celebrating our partnership. You were celebrating your ownership of me." Julian's voice carried across the silent room. "Everything I built, everything I created, reduced to a prop in your perfect life story. Just like you've done too." Emma gasped as if she'd been slapped. Victoria took a step toward her sister, but Julian's next words froze everyone in place. "You want to know the truth, Philip? The merger was dying anyway. Your company is so deep in debt that my lawyers advised me to run. But I was going to save you because I thought our friendship meant something, because I thought you actually cared about more than just money. Julian stopped, Victoria pleaded, but he was beyond hearing her now. But then I realized you don't care about friendship. You don't even care about Emma. She's just another acquisition to you, another beautiful thing to own and display. Philip lunged forward, but Julian sidestepped easily. You're wrong, Philip snarled. I love Emma, do you? Then why haven't you told her that Morrison Industries has been hemorrhaging money for 2 years? Why doesn't she know that without my technology patents you'll be bankrupt by Christmas? The words hit Emma like physical blows. She staggered backward, her perfect composure finally shattering. Is that true? She whispered, looking at Philip with eyes that held too much knowledge now. Philip's silence was answer enough. Victoria watched her sister's fairy tale crumble in real time, knowing that Julian had just destroyed 3 lives with surgical precision, including his own. And the worst part was, she understood why he'd done it. The terrible, devastating truth was that everything Julian had said was right. Philip had used people like chess pieces, manipulating friendship and love to build his empire. But being right didn't make the destruction any less complete, as Emma fled the reception hall in a rustle of silk and tears. Victoria realized that some betrayals were so perfect in their cruelty that they left nothing standing in their wake, not even the person who'd wielded the knife. Asterisk. Victoria found Emma in the hotel's rose garden, sitting on a marble bench beneath a trellis heavy with late-blooming flowers. The wedding dress spread around her like spilled cream. But the fairy tale princess was gone, replaced by a woman who looked hollow-eyed and brittle. Emma. Her sister looked up, mascara streaking down her cheeks in dark rivers. He knew Emma, said quietly. All this time, Philip knew he was bankrupt, and he married me anyway. Victoria sat beside her, careful not to disturb the elaborate train of the dress. Maybe he thought he could fix it. Or maybe he thought I was stupid enough not to notice when the money ran out. Emma's voice was bitter, unfamiliar. God, Victoria, what kind of fool am I? 3 years I've been planning this wedding, this life, and it was all built on lies. Not all of it. Oh. Philip loves you? Does he? Or does he love the idea of me? The perfect wife will smile and look beautiful while he lies about everything that matters. Victoria didn't have an answer. The truth was too complicated, too painful to untangle in a rose garden while her sister's marriage died before it had truly begun. What are you going to do? Emma was quiet for a long moment, staring at the diamond ring that caught the moonlight like trapped fire. I don't know. Annulment, maybe. Go back to my old apartment, my old job. Start over. She looked at Victoria with eyes that held too much knowledge. What about you? What about me? Julian Torres just destroyed his best friend's life and his own company's reputation for you. Don't pretend you don't know why. Victoria's chest tightened. Emma, it's not that simple, isn't it? Man doesn't burn down the world unless something matters more than the world. The way he looked at you during that dance, the way you looked at him. Emma shook her head. I may be naive about business, but I'm not blind about love. Before Victoria could respond, footsteps crunched on the gravel path. Julian appeared at the edge of the garden, his bow tie hanging loose around his neck. His perfect composure finally cracked beyond repair. Emma, he said quietly. I'm sorry. Emma stood, the wedding dress rustling around her like autumn leaves. Are you? Or are you sorry you got caught? Julian's jaw tightened. I'm sorry I hurt you. That was never my intention. Hurting Philip. Was Philip hurt himself? I just stopped enabling it. Emma studied Julian's face in the moonlight, seeing something there that made her expression soften slightly. You're in love with my sister. It wasn't a question. Julian's silence was confirmation enough. And you, Emma turned to Victoria, are in love with him. Victoria opened her mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. What was the point of lying now? Everything was already broken. Yes, she whispered. Emma nodded slowly, as if confirming something she'd already known. Then I guess the question is, what are you going to do about it? Nothing, Victoria said quickly. Emma, your marriage. My marriage is over. Emma's voice was surprisingly steady. It was over. The moment Philip chose to lie to me about something. This fundamental, the moment he decided I was too fragile or too stupid to handle the truth, She pulled off the Morrison diamond ring, holding it up so it caught the light from the hotel windows. "These aren't family heirlooms," she said quietly. "Philip told me they were, but I did some research after our conversation this morning. He bought them last week. Even the family history was fake." Emma placed the ring on the marble bench between them. "I'm not going to pretend to be happy about what happened tonight. Julian, what you did was cruel and public and designed to cause maximum damage. But maybe that's what Philip needed. Maybe what we all needed." She gathered up her skirts, preparing to leave. "Emma, wait." Victoria stood. "Where are you going?" "To change out of this dress and figure out who I am when I'm not. Trying to be the perfect wife." Emma paused at the edge of the garden. "It's for you two. You've already destroyed everything else. You might as well try to build something real from the wreckage." Victoria watched her sister disappear into the hotel, leaving her alone with Julian beneath the roses. "She's right," Julian said quietly, "about what I did being cruel. Could have withdrawn from the merger quietly, privately. Instead, I chose to humiliate Philip in front of everyone." "Why?" Julian was quiet for so long that Victoria thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with exhaustion. "Because I've spent 10 years watching Philip take things that weren't his. Credit for ideas that came from my team. Deals that my connections made possible. Even Emma, in a way. Do you think it was coincidence that he started dating your sister? Right after I mentioned meeting an interesting artist at a gallery opening." Victoria's blood chilled. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Philip has a pattern of wanting what other people have. And tonight, watching him turn our friendship into a business announcement, our sacrifice into his triumph, I finally understood that he would never stop taking unless someone made him stop, so you destroyed him." "I destroyed his ability to use people. Philip is smart and talented. He'll land on his feet. But maybe next time, he'll think twice before building his dreams on other people's backs." Victoria studied Julian's face in the moonlight, seeing the cost of what he'd done written in the lines around his eyes. "And what about your dreams?" Julian stepped closer, close enough that she could see the pain he was trying to hide. "My dreams died the moment I realized I was in love with someone I couldn't have without destroying everything I claimed to care." "About Julian, leaving for San Francisco tomorrow," he said. "Torres Tech will survive the scandal, but I need to be far away from the wreckage. From the temptation to try to fix things that can't be fixed. What if I came with you?" The words surprised Victoria as much as they surprised Julian. She hadn't planned to say them, hadn't even realized she was thinking them until they spilled out. "Victoria, you can't. Your gallery, your life, gallery's failing, has been for months. I've been too proud to admit it, even to myself." Victoria took a step closer to Julian. "And as for my life, what life? Emma was the only family I had. Left, and now she's starting over anyway. You'd give up everything for someone you barely know?" "I'd give up everything for someone who made me feel alive for the first time in years. Someone who looked at my paintings and saw something worth saving." Julian's careful control finally cracked completely. He reached for her, his hands framing her face with desperate gentleness. "We've destroyed so many lives to get here," he said quietly. "Then maybe it's time to build something new." Julian kissed her then, soft and fierce and full of everything they'd been holding back. When they broke apart, Victoria could taste salt on her lips and wasn't sure if it was from her tears or his. "San Francisco?" she asked. "San Francisco," he confirmed. "We'll figure out the rest as we go." 6 months later, Victoria stood in the main gallery of her new space in Soma, watching Julian hang her latest painting. The morning light streaming through the tall windows made the colors glow like stained glass. Higher on the left, she directed, stepping back to get a better view. "Perfectionist," Julian muttered, but he was smiling as he adjusted the frame. The painting was one of her favorites from the new series. Bold strokes and deep blues and silver that somehow captured the feeling of starting over, of building something real from the ashes of everything that had come before. Her phone buzzed against the paint-stained work table. "Victoria?" "It's Emma." Victoria's heart jumped. They'd talked sporadically over the past 6 months. Careful conversations that skirted around the edges of what had happened at the wedding. Emma was living in Boston now, working at a nonprofit that helped women start small businesses. Sounded happier than she had in years. "How are you?" Victoria asked. "Good, really good. I wanted you to know that Philip signed the divorce papers yesterday. It's officially over. I'm sorry, don't be. I'm not." Emma's voice was lighter than Victoria had heard it in years. "Actually, I'm calling because I have news." "What kind of news?" "I'm getting married." Victoria nearly dropped the phone. "Emma, what? To who?" "His name's David. He's a social worker. Makes about 1/10 of what Philip did. And he's the most honest person I've ever met. No trust fund, no family connections, no hidden agendas. It's just a guy who thinks I'm amazing exactly as I am." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "Emma, that's wonderful." "It is. And Victoria, I want you at this wedding, both of you." Victoria looked across the gallery at Julian, who was pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. What happened that night, it was awful and public and humiliating. But it was also true. Philip did lie to me, and I was too scared to see it. Maybe it took something that dramatic to wake me up. And Philip is fine. Better than fine, actually. Losing everything forced him to remember who he was before the money and the pressure. He's teaching business classes at Columbia now, and from what I hear, he's actually happy." Victoria closed her eyes, feeling a weight she'd carried for months. Finally lifting, double quotes, "Emma, I love you. I'm sorry for everything that happened. I love you too. And Victoria, stop apologizing for choosing happiness. Some of us have to burn down the wrong life before we can build the right one." After Emma hung up, Victoria stood in the morning light of her gallery, surrounded by paintings that told the story of starting over. Julian appeared at her side, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. "Wedding invitation?" he asked. "Wedding invitation? Are we going?" Victoria leaned back against Julian's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her shoulders. Outside, San Francisco was waking up, full of possibilities they were still discovering together. "Yes," she said. "We're going. Some stories." Victoria had learned didn't end with perfect weddings or tidy resolutions. Some stories ended with two people choosing each other despite the cost, building something real from the wreckage of everything they thought they wanted. Some stories ended with the courage to start again, knowing that the only way to earn a happy ending was to fight for it, sacrifice for it, believe it was possible, even when everything seemed lost. Standing in her gallery with Julian's arms around her and Emma's forgiveness bright in her memory, Victoria finally understood that some loves were worth destroying the world for. But the best loves were the ones that helped you build a new one. The end.